Recording. Welcome to the Vineyard Political Podcast for June. Let's see, what's today's date? June 15th. Today is LRS is bankrupt, closed, defunct, headline, and we brought in Ben Abbott to interview and get his response, ideas. What did we learn? For those that have been following, there's some bombshell things that came out, but also there's a lot of things that we don't know. So Ben, been about 3 months since we last spoke on the Vineyard Political Podcast. What have we learned? What came out? And give us the announcement firsthand.
Yeah, I mean, everything has changed in that time. LRS announced that on June 12th, they had dissolved their LLC. And so far, the only evidence we have that they dissolved the LLC is a Word document that they sent the judge in the case against me and my lawyers. So we don't know if it's actually been executed, but in any case, they have announced that the LLC has dissolved or is dissolving. And it's kind of the equivalent of bankruptcy, but apparently you can revoke a dissolution. So I don't know if it's like dead, or if it's a Princess Bride situation where it's like mostly dead. And in conjunction with that announcement, they also said that they were hoping to dismiss the case against me, but because they don't have attorneys, on May 23rd, their counsel withdrew in their case against me and their defense against my countersuit. So we don't know if that was because they stopped paying their counsel and they had to withdraw, or if because they fired their counsel because they weren't happy with how the lawsuit was going. So
for those in the state and county and Vineyard City, let's give some context here real quick. You guys know that there was a development company that came together, LRS, or Lake Restoration Solutions. They proposed an island system, or a set of islands and housing project out in the middle of the lake. Ben, professor of BYU, came together, looked through those documents, started criticizing openly and publicly about the way it was. Wakara Way, Conserve Utah Valley organized and said, how is this being done in the dark of night? What are these details? Let's look into it. We found out a lot of things. The Vineyard mayor financially signing letters, loan documents, and whatnot. We fought to try to get those out. Went to the state court to get those made public through grandma. She deemed those as protected. And then Ben was sued by LRS. And then that was thrown out, just to give context. But now LRS has gone bankrupt. So what did we learn? What else did we learn in the filings? And there was also a Salt Lake Tribune article that also came out about it as well.
Yeah, just 1 second. We've got some kids here that want to play Nintendo Switch, and so let me tell. Hey, could you guys play upstairs? Caspian? No, I think we're doing an interview here, so we can, if you can play upstairs until we're done, that'd be great.
Oh, no, how long is it gonna be?
I think probably 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay.
Talk to you later.
I'm just gonna grab a controller.
Important Nintendo Switch negotiations.
I'll cut it out, no worries. So anyway, the question was, Salt Lake Tribune came out and also revealed some things that we found.
Yeah, there have been 3 really good pieces of reporting so far on these developments. One's in the Tribune, one's in the Daily Herald, one's in the Deseret News. Actually 4. There's also one on Fox 13. And they all have different pieces of the story. So one of the revelations is LRS was suing the state to make them reconsider the project, even though it's been rejected multiple times by the state. They said, we're going to drop that case. However, they asked that it be done without prejudice, which means that they could bring back their lawsuit at any time. So again, a little bit suspicious as far as, is it really dead or not? the state's response to that was pretty bold and surprising, I thought. FFSL, the main division that's in charge of managing Utah Lake, said that they were disappointed that they wouldn't be able to complete that process and actually get a resolution and see all of the documents from LRS. So again, really cool to see kind of the side of truth and reason prevailing there.
By ending that way, they would never know kind of documents as to kind of the details of everything behind the scenes, emails back and forth and whatnot.
Exactly. And that is precisely why I think LRS has announced this at this time. You know, the judge ordered them back in April to pay my attorneys $174,000 to cover all the expenses for the case because it was an illegal SLAPP suit. And then the judge was preparing to rule on how much they would have to pay me in damages for infringing my free speech rights. So this is pretty convenient. It's a way that they're trying to wiggle out from having to pay that. But also, they were about to have to sit for some depositions. And either I think that they would have had to either disclose, what they'd said to different investors or perjure themselves, right? So that was a lot higher stakes than what had happened before.
So by ending now, not only do we not get to documents and understanding it in the state level, by ending or trying to close now, they don't have to disclose on your case or do depositions or provide any further documents. So it's like, hey, I throw a punch at your face, but now I'm just gonna end. I'm no longer playing this game. I don't need to. How did that happen? Or
That's right. Well, and this is not a surprise, right? This was what I and many others had brought up as one of the risks of working with these guys from the beginning. As an LLC, there's no accountability. They put all of the risk on the public while privatizing all of the profits of the project. So, not a surprise, but it is pretty disappointing that they're trying to avoid that accountability. Now, on Monday, we've got a conference with the judge, and we're hoping that there will be a way of holding them accountable, because dissolving your LLC doesn't actually stop automatically legal actions that are outstanding. So there still is a chance that we might be able to get some of those documents, but it definitely is a part of this pattern of disclose as little as possible, only talk to people one-on-one in a non-transparent way.
Yeah, when we try and talk to our vineyard mayor, she'll say, come in and talk to me. Don't hold public meeting minutes or, hey, just turn over the documents and we can talk later. We don't need to speak one-on-one, Yeah.
There was also a really important revelation that came in the Salt Lake Tribune article, which I'd encourage everybody to read. It Mayor Fulmer does have a quote in there, an email back and forth about about her involvement. But Leah Larson found out that the SEC actually censured Foresight Wealth Management, the kind of main investment group that had been running LRS's finances, for improper business practices and misleading over 80 investors. Now, this was fraud that happened actually prior to their investment or their involvement with LRS. It went up through 2018, but they had to pay over $3 million, which I understand is a pretty large amount for these kinds of financial issues. But this is a big deal because it's the same group that put together that slide deck where we first heard about Vineyard's involvement, that loan guarantee letter, where we first saw kind of the plans and timeline. And it certainly looks to me like they were engaged in exactly the same kind of impropriety to get investments flowing toward the LRS project. So hopefully, I assume that there is an SEC investigation ongoing, at least into Foresight and maybe into the other group called, I think their name is Prospera, that works for LRS.
Yeah, so I did read the article and I did read the mayor's. There were no presentations for planning ever moved past the state and federal level, so we have little to speak on. And she said Vineyard never ratified anything with Lake Restoration Solutions, which she's answering a question that nobody's asking. What everyone's asking is and that's what I wanted to ask you, was a lot has happened. You know, Mayor Fulmer has two letters, a 2018 letter and a 2020 letter. Mayor Fulmer still has not disclosed what employees within LRS engaged. These are my questions. She's never disclosed who she met with at Prospera or at LRS to get a 2018 letter of Vineyard City RDA is going to commit $5 million to a federal loan, or as a guarantor, conditional loan guarantor for a $700 million federal loan out in the island. And we basically want to know, so when you turned over that document, what employees were in the room besides you? Was it just by yourself? You know, no one else knows. You haven't seen anything on that. So that's kind of,
it's a total black box of what was LRS doing, who were they meeting with, what were they saying to whom, and that's one of the issues here. And I don't mean to interject, but for me, this isn't some kind of witch hunt where we say, hey, anybody who ever supported the islands is bad. That's clearly not the case, right? There were plenty of honest, good people who simply heard the pitch, it sounded good, and they went along with it. We all make mistakes, and not everything ends up panning out. My concern is, what is the process, and is this going to happen again, where there isn't any disclosure of what's happening, where nobody knows what agreements and commitments are being made? That's what's really troubling to me. For the vineyard loan, for the vineyard funds, for the state's funds, the involvement of the Utah Lake Commission and now Utah Lake Authority, we have no idea. And they're kind of just expecting us to trust them that they're making good choices. But as you said, there continues to be zero talk and zero public recognition of, okay, yeah, we did support it at this time. We don't anymore. Here's what happened. That seems like a pretty reasonable demand.
well, we're probably 30 million invested into this as citizens. I mean, let's break it down. You've got a 2018 legislative loan. You've got people studying it out. You've got Eric Ellis running around holding countless meetings.
Yeah.
Every various city. I don't know how many Lake Commission or Lake Authority meetings that have gone through. You've had multiple DNR, forestry, fire, and state lands. You've now had to defend this in court.
Yeah.
To go through and do this. So my whole purpose of getting the paper trail, and also vineyard employees, vineyard staffing, Orem staffing, provost staffing, I mean, just the whole thing, we're 30 million. There's no question that's even under that. I mean, and that ballpark is probably much higher when you're thinking about the multiple years, but why was everything conducted so dark, and can we say, hey, from now on, when we're going to build 500,000 people in the middle of the lake, what do we have in practice in place with those that were involved? Because we don't even know who they were.
Yeah.
It would start at a normal public process, you know? And so getting to the documents to find out, well, who was the person that pushed this through? And if we just talked to them, not to retribution or get in trouble, but just, this wouldn't happen. This would be going before the Lake Commission or Lake Authority now. This would be going through city councils. Something of this magnitude would be going from state employees at forestry, fire, and state lands first and foremost. And then, and how do we make sure senators or representatives don't just put some quiet bill in, run it, and nobody knows about it, and we get down, because we lost 30 million in just bad policy, right?
Totally. And I agree with you that probably only scratches the surface, right? That the iceberg of taxpayer money that was wasted on this was enormous. And
right, because right now I look at it and I go, oh, Mayor Fulmer is the head of the Utah Lake Authority. Like, okay, so we're just move forward. Like, what do you do with that? So the next thing, I mean, there's so many more other questions that are just so juicy. Like, okay, so if it was really nothing, Mayor, you've denied the grandma emails and deemed them as protected. Now that they're dead, company doesn't exist, they're public record. So there's no ongoing negotiations. Why can't we make them public? There should be
Yeah.
pressure today. Like right when I heard it, I'm like, great. What was the purpose for protecting them?
Yeah.
So I think Vineyard City residents today or tomorrow need to go and get into that. Number two, we still haven't answered the question who in Vineyard City knew that Julie had signed that above and beyond Jake McCarg, the previous city manager. And then also,
Well, on that one, I think we do, right? The city council is on the record of saying that they had no knowledge of this, that they had
Right.
never met about or heard. So at least I guess we know who didn't know about it, and that was the city council.
right, but again, you're talking about $1 billion project with this quiet letter.
Yeah.
Were there city employees? Were there city staff? Were there city secretaries where it's like, hey, this meeting was scheduled, it was an
Yeah.
official meeting, this is conducted so that, I'm sitting here as a Vineyard City resident. I'm like, could someone just come on, knock on the door, and we're gonna do this through Julie's Gmail again, and nobody knows, and it's not to go get her in trouble, but it's like there has to be a public accounting.
Yeah.
So we know as residents because it's really not LRS. And I think the citizens need to understand this. You can create another LLC with the same exact actors, throw through
Yeah.
the same thing, put a different plan together, a highway through the lake or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's the actors, it's the people that are involved.
right.
And it's
Yep.
like, well, wait a second, we still don't even know who any of these people are, right? They're shadowy, and that's my concern.
I completely agree, and it's our job as engaged citizens to try to reform the system so that it's not so vulnerable to this kind of corruption and shady dealing.
Right. The other thing is Julie claimed that the RDA council had approved the letter, never found anything. She said that in multiple posts. We'd asked her, could she prove meeting minutes, documentation, or anything like that for the 5 million? Nothing has ever been. Council member Chris Judd and Nate Riley has stated publicly that they didn't know or vote for the 2008 letter. So why is that at odds? Like, what is the? I mean, they're not very far. We're a very small city, so why is the entire previous council on record this way, and Julie is on record this way?
Mm-hmm.
And you've got to reconcile from a public standpoint what happened there. The February 2022, the thing that I still didn't get was when the LRS financial prospectus surfaced, why did Julie claim that was for a grant and shoreline improvements? And then now that we know that the FCC, that PowerPoint, that entity was fined the $3 million.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like for shady business practices. Okay, now that asks more questions to me that if the FCC is fining them, Julie, who did you meet with there at the site? Because they just got fined. So this isn't just move forward. This is the FCC, the PowerPoint that we was going out and selling. So when I read it, it was like, oh, LRS is dead. And I'm like, that's not the story.
Totally.
The story is that the FCC fined them and Julie's working with that entity still to this day. So
or that she could be, right? We just don't know. That is the issue here. And so much could be cleared up if people would just say, here's the timeline, here are the documents. They are supposed to be public record. And like you mentioned, the entity doesn't exist anymore. LRS is not, so there's no confidentiality there or business contract stuff, but we just have to see that record. Because if we can't acknowledge, if we can't do a self-assessment of like, okay, what happened, what didn't happen the way that we wanted it to, then we're not going to make any progress. We're just going to repeat this over and over again.
Well, and one of the things for the Vineyard residents that followed this for 9 months, when we had the PowerPoint of that prospectus, Julie continued to claim through various public facing comments on Facebook and in meetings that it was for shoreline improvements and a grant.
Yeah.
That is so far of the public record and all the documents that there's no way she would have known that. So at a bare minimum, I apologize. I did I did guide you down a path that wasn't true, because we now know that it was. Okay, now that LRS is dead, is dead, we can now talk about this, right?
Yeah.
So why can't the citizens know this? Because
Totally.
this could come before, this is ongoing negotiations, this could consider, what's going on.
Yeah. Well,
That-
that highlights, I think, three ways that this is still a current issue. Because this isn't about like things that went on in the distant past, pre-COVID. This is about today, right? So the first one is the Utah Lake Authority is making deals, trying to manage land, trying to make arrangements for disturbing wetlands, and that's being led by multiple people who were supporters, or you might even call them agents of the island project. So that's item number one that makes this contemporary.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we need clarity. Item number two is the same group of people are still seeking taxpayer money. And Don Pay, who was kind of the mentor of Ryan Benson when they started their anti-endangered species lobbying long before LRS, he just got $500,000 to lobby against the gray wolf and $1 million to cut down trees and do the test of this logger rolling thing. And that's money that was taken from programs that need to be supported. For example, like Phragmites removal and real shoreline maintenance. So this group is still siphoning off taxpayer money today. And so that's why we need to know who's talking to who's connecting this in with the legislature. And
also to put it into context, when we went to the state grandma hearing, the city mayor defended that as this could be an ongoing bill that could potentially come before the city council or the legislature in the future. So therefore, all of these documents are protected because some member of the legislature. So it's like, we don't know who that legislator is.
yeah,
We can't ask them questions. We have a loss of 30 million, some odd of all this effort. Have they learned anything? Could we stop it through there? What have we learned on, so, and also now that LRS is dead, legislature, Vineyard, can we make these documents public?
yeah.
Now, because it can't be, they're dead, right? Or are you still saying, what is the position of Vineyard City? Could we be putting highways through Vineyard again and all of this? We're still going to be a partner. Have we ended that partnership with Forsyth?
Totally.
What are those documents to show that that this is over? We get to know if that where things are. We don't get to, so that's the other aim.
Exactly.
Well,
and that's what I was going to mention. As far as I know, Vineyard is still employing Jeff Hartley as a lobbyist, and maybe both Jeff and Greg Hartley. And so they are conflicted. They did not disclose that conflict of interest when the city hired them, but they were total double agents. And so this is really contemporary. Tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of city money is going to this same team. And again, I completely respect the city's agency. They're the ones that get to decide who they hire, but we need to have transparency. So why did you go with them? Do you consider it an issue that they didn't disclose this conflict of interest? Because that their lobbying license should be pulled. That's a strong requirement.
100% agree. But also, I think Vineyard citizens and all those throughout the county and state need to understand that, LRS threw this out to Provo, Orem, all these other cities, right? We're a very young city. We don't have a lot of organizational things in place. And so they came through. This is a matter of growing up as a city.
Yeah.
And saying, okay, is this going to happen again? Or what is this process? And it's like those questions need to be answered. And you just can't go, oh, this company LRS is bankrupt.
And therefore, no harm, no foul. Exactly. That's well, Jake, I've got to say, last summer, we got a call from LRS's lawyers where they said, you know what, we're out of money. Why don't we just call this off? Why don't we just say no harm, no foul? We'll just walk away from the lawsuit. And we were like, heck no. You think of the damage that you've caused, and these were illegal actions. We need to have accountability. But then just days later, they turned around and sued the state. So again, it was total deception. They had resources. They were planning on doing this action already. So whether it is through the next LLC that they form or through some kind of resurrection of LRS, we need to follow these lines. And it's also our right. We're going to be voting for our state representative, our state senator. I think that we all deserve to know, did they act as agents for LRS? Now,
and
if
there's
they
some
supported
bad,
them, great. We just
right,
need to know.
absolutely. And there's bad agents. It doesn't mean the senator or the representative, but for them to stay quiet through the process and say, hey, I was a victim of this, or I did not get full attention. For them to not come out and go to the newspaper and say, hey, look, this $3 million thing happened. They were censured and I was defrauded in a way. I think Vineyard City or the mayor could come out. Like, that's why I was shocked about the article. It was like, oh, I got nothing to say. It didn't get approved, so go on. It's like, whoa. The FCC came out and fined them $3 million, and it's just walk away. It's not, hey, they came and met with me and I felt defrauded and it was a waste. And I don't want that to go through there. And our sovereignty was questioned.
Totally. The very first interaction that I had with Mayor Fulmer was years ago at a Utah Lake Commission meeting. And we were talking about the project. And I just brought up, as a lake ecologist, I've got some real concerns about this with what they're claiming, also the permitting story. And she told me that they had said that they were under contract with the EPA, which isn't a thing, And so for me, that immediately I realized, hey, they are misleading Mayor Fulmer and presumably others, right? They're saying these same stories, and I tried to communicate that to her, but for whatever reason, she continued in that path. So again, I love the idea, and I think it's likely. LRS was lying to so many people and telling them what they wanted to hear, that it was going to solve all their problems. So I understand if people were misled. We've just got to take a mature look at the system and say, okay, how did that happen? How can we make sure it doesn't happen again? Because there are going to be a bunch of crazy, outlandish proposals that are made. That comes up.
Yeah. The last things that I felt like we shouldn't know that I'm still sitting on is, if you remember back when LRS presented to Vineyard City back in February of last year, they never made mention in the presentation to all the Vineyard Cities about the loan guarantee, and $5 million is a lot of money for Vineyard City. So when they went and made this presentation, Julie, you didn't in that meeting go, oh, hey, by the way, we're conditionally putting forth this type of money. Do you find that as a mistake? That's a big amount of money. We don't have a fire department. Why? It seems like at every realm you're hiding at every single time. And if it becomes a pattern, you've got to jump in and say, hey, we were all in that meeting and you said, hey, the feds are already doing it. And not only that, but the feds threw it out months later and said, you don't even have a plan. So it was like, and then the last thing is, when the LRS financial prospectus was made public, Morgan Brim, the city planner, and the entire planning commission stated that they had never been involved, didn't know about the roads, didn't know anything about that. Now that LRS is bankrupt, you're not going to be threatened on being sued. Why was the entire Vineyard City Planning Commission left out of the dark? Like, why was the city planner? And what are we changing about our culture within our city so that when somebody comes and meets and requests $5 million, you don't say, I'm not going to be in this meeting. This needs to start with professional staff.
Totally.
The public process. This needs to be massaged a little bit so that it doesn't amplify and grow to that $30 million loss. Like there's bad ideas. You're throwing out ideas left and right. Hey, let's do this. Let's do that.
Yeah.
If you're as a Vineyard resident or mayor just signing things and nobody knows about it, you can't stop. A citizen can't say, hey, over here, this isn't a good idea. A roadway through here. That's not, and that kind of shadowy work I want to look at and say, now that they're closed, can we talk about this is broken? Moving forward, this is our Vineyard City policy, because you got to grow up, right? You've got to, it was shut down so fast through other cities because they have those best practices in place. And then the other thing that I saw that still has not been answered is, you know, the WITHIA loan didn't come until June of 2022, you know, with the EPA forcing that. Why were you guys quiet? Like, can you now talk about that? Was it because they were under investigation from the FCC and you guys were connected to that? Now that this book chapter is closed and they're now defunct, and if they are defunct, it sounds like we could now talk about this.
Yeah.
We need to have this should be the loud period. In the next coming 10 to 14 days, there should be massive amount of documents.
Yeah.
Hey, this is over. We were afraid of getting sued. We were worried. We were connected here. We were connected to this false investment Ponzi scheme.
Yeah.
And so therefore we couldn't talk. And I understand that, you know, I even thought that they opened themselves up to litigation for putting their name on it. I said that from the beginning, you know. And then the other thing is you know, between February of 2022 and June of 2022, the mayor claimed that the LRS letter was a grant given to the city. Oh, I already covered that. It wasn't. So how do we correct that? Like the record of, hey, there's got to be an apology because you're talking about months. And then lastly, both the previous city council and the previous have stated on numerous occasions that they knew nothing about a loan. So what is the public structure of getting a loan letter and a loan document from Vineyard City to approve any of these projects moving forward so that this doesn't ever happen again, so that there's no there's got to be some sort of paper trail, some sort of government process so that it's not, is this a grant or is this a loan, and what city employee has been trained to head that up or that effort up.
Yeah.
Because what it feels like to me is that Mayor Fulmer, now at the head of the Lake Authority, and many others quietly behind the scenes had Utah residents losing 30-50 million dollars on this whole charades. And we got to pick up the pieces and go, okay, so how do we, because LRS and these people are not going away. Like,
yep.
They're like, especially because none of them are getting in trouble at this point. Like there's no, it just move on, shake our hands. So any closing remarks?
Well, that last point that you made, I really want us to be looking forward and be positive about what can we change in a good way. But for repentance to happen, for real change to happen, there does have to be accountability and recognition of what went wrong. And I was actually inspired just maybe a couple months ago now. Governor Cox spoke at the Stegner Symposium, and he talked about how when we acknowledge that something didn't go right and we apologize for it, that builds trust. Right. And that's my invitation. It's my hope. Here, sorry, my kids are coming down. I bet that they're coming down to apologize after hurting each other. This is like a perfect segue. Caspian and Naomi, could you guys get along? I'm just about done here, and then I'll be able to come and play with you. Okay, Naomi, was that okay?
I would say the same thing. Obviously, as the founder of Wakara Way, I want to be a partner with the Lake Forestry and Fire and State Lands. Bravo, the leadership! Holy cow! If you're not a fan of Joel Ferry, of all the staff that's there, wonderful.
Jamie Barnes, Ben Steierman, yeah.
I mean, I get chills, of the leadership and how scary it is to go through and do that. I'm hoping that Vineyard City will find and say, hey, everyone hates government bureaucracy, but at the end of the day, it's what keeps citizens, keeps a fair process. It's really what makes our nation, our union strong, our state strong, and our city strong. And that's why I'm so, run the Vineyard Political Cat podcast. It's scary for them. You know what I mean? It's like a lot of people don't know government, don't get into the details, and don't really know how important these are, but it's the savings of money, and it's also it's our foot at the table of government, of do we get to play a role in
Yeah.
in our government? And those best practices have to be in place. So I don't think we know everything. I think we're going to learn something. We'll bring you back in the next coming, couple of months, because but I would first say we've got to be fighting to get documents out of Vineyard. We've got to be fighting to get documents out of LRS, and the Utah Lake Authority. Just because you close the door doesn't mean that we're not waiting to understand what happened. It doesn't go away. So that's so thanks for joining us. Go play with your kids.
Thanks a lot, Jake. Good talking with you.
Thanks, Ben. See ya. Bye.